From the outside, my family looked flawless. My mom, Rachel Taylor, was a corporate powerhouse who turned every meeting into a victory lap. My stepdad, Nathan, ran his own construction business and had this casual charm that made him everyone's favorite at barbecues. And me? I was the quiet observer, 19, and planning my escape to NYU as soon as I finished community college. But perfection has a way of cracking when you look too close. It started with Mom's schedule. She'd always been the type to stick to routines: early mornings, late afternoons, family dinners. Lately, though, she was coming home later and later, smelling of some expensive perfume that wasn't hers and brushing off my questions with, "Work's just been crazy." Nathan, meanwhile, was around more than usual. He always seemed to be home, fixing things, offering to help me with homework, and making comments that felt a little too personal. "You're the most talented one in this family, Liv," he said one evening, watching me type up an essay. "Your mom doesn't appreciate that enough." I laughed it off, brushing past the weird tension in his tone. The first real red flag came one Thursday afternoon. I was on the couch scrolling through my laptop when Nathan sat down beside me, closer than necessary. "What are you working on?" he asked, peering at my screen. "An essay," I said, trying to angle the laptop away from him. "Let me see," he insisted, leaning over. His knee pressed against mine, and I felt a flicker of unease. "You're really talented, Liv," he said after scanning a few lines. "You're going to do great things." "Thanks," I muttered, shutting the laptop and standing up. "I should get back to it." He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that lingered, something I didn't want to name. The uneasy moments piled up after that. Nathan started finding reasons to be near me, making comments that skirted the line between compliments and something darker. The breaking point came when Mom left for another work trip, leaving Nathan and me alone for the weekend. He suggested a movie night, and I agreed, thinking it was harmless. But halfway through, I noticed he wasn't watching the movie. He was watching me. "You remind me of Rachel when she was your age," he said suddenly. My stomach turned. "Thanks, I guess." "She had that fire in her," he continued, his voice soft. "But you're different. More real." "Nathan, I'm going to bed," I said, standing up. He grabbed my arm lightly. "Liv, wait, I didn't mean—" "Good night," I said firmly, pulling away and locking my bedroom door behind me. That night, I lay in bed, piecing it all together. Mom's late nights. Nathan's strange attention. None of it felt right. Something was happening in this family, something no one wanted to admit. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. The day after the movie night, I avoided Nathan entirely. I stayed in my room, emerging only when I heard him leave for work. Even then, the house felt suffocating, like the tension had seeped into the walls. When Mom returned from her work trip that evening, I decided to test the waters. "How was your trip?" I asked, watching her closely as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Exhausting," she replied casually, tossing her scarf onto the counter. "Nothing exciting." But something didn't sit right. Her lipstick was too perfect, her scarf too neatly tied. I decided to dig deeper. Later that night, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone off the counter. My hands shook as I opened her messages. Most were mundane, but one thread caught my eye. Derek L. "Derek, miss you already." Rachel, "Me too.
Can't wait for next time."
Derek, "You looked incredible in that dress last night." Rachel, "Flattery will get you everywhere." My stomach churned as I scrolled through the thread. It wasn't work. It wasn't innocent. Mom was having an affair. Nathan was back to his cheerful self the next morning, acting as if nothing had happened. "Extra syrup, extra creativity," he joked, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of me. "Thanks," I muttered, poking at the food. "Something on your mind?" he asked, his tone overly warm. "Just tired," I lied, avoiding his gaze. But I wasn't just tired. I was unraveling. Over the next few days, the unease grew. Mom spent more time at work, while Nathan made himself more present, lingering in conversations, finding excuses to be near me. One evening, I overheard Mom on the phone. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," she said. "I've got it under control." There was a pause, followed by a soft laugh. I know. You're worth it. The tipping point came when Nathan joined me in the backyard one afternoon. You know, Liv, you're going to do great things, he said, sitting too close. You've got something special.
Different.
I stood abruptly, my heart pounding. I should go. Homework. He didn't stop me, but his gaze followed me inside, lingering like a shadow. By the end of the week, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I called my best friend, Danielle, and told her about Mom's affair. Are you going to confront her? She asked. I don't know, I said, staring out the window. I need more proof. Danielle sighed. Just be careful, Liv. It sounds messy. Messy didn't begin to describe it. But one thing was clear. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to face it head on. I spent the next few days gathering proof. I didn't even know what I planned to do with it, but something about having concrete evidence made me feel like I had control in a situation where everything felt unsteady. Mom's affair wasn't hard to track. She left breadcrumbs everywhere. Her messages with Derek were full of hints, hotel names, meeting locations, inside jokes. I even caught her sending a selfie while sitting in her car one evening, a coy smile on her face that I'd never seen her direct at Nathan. Nathan was harder to figure out. His behavior toward me was subtle enough that it could be dismissed as friendly, if I hadn't felt the knot in my stomach every time he looked at me. He didn't touch me again after that night, but his comments and lingering presence made it clear he was testing boundaries. One evening, while Mom was working late, I decided to test my own boundaries. I grabbed her laptop from her office, settling into my bed with it. Her password wasn't hard to guess. Mom was nothing if not predictable when it came to PIN codes and logins. Within minutes, I was scrolling through her emails. There it was. Dozens of messages between Mom and Derek. Most of them mirrored their texts, but one thread stood out. New York opportunity. I spoke to the board. If we can finalize the proposal, there's a spot for you at HQ Senior VP. You've earned this. You're incredible. I couldn't do this without you. I couldn't imagine doing it without you. My chest tightened as I read the thread. Mom wasn't just having an affair, she was leveraging it for her career. The next morning, Nathan found me in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone while I ate cereal. You're up early, he said, leaning against a counter. Got a lot to do, I replied, keeping my eyes on my phone. You've been quiet lately, he said, his tone light but probing. Everything okay?
Yeah.
Just busy. He nodded, but he didn't leave. Instead, he sat across from me, sipping his coffee and watching me with a look I couldn't quite place. You know, he said after a moment, it's okay to talk to me. If something's on your mind, I'm fine, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He frowned slightly, but before he could say anything else, Mom walked in, her heels clicking against the tile. Morning, she said, grabbing a to-go mug for her coffee. She barely glanced at either of us. Nathan's eyes followed her as she moved around the kitchen. For a brief moment, his mask slipped, and I saw something in his expression. Resentment, maybe. I tucked that away for later. That night, I overheard them arguing. I'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when their voices drifted upstairs. At first, I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Sharp, tense, angry. I crept down the stairs, stopping just out of sight. You're gone all the time, Rachel, Nathan was saying. What exactly am I supposed to think? Think whatever you want, Nathan, Mom snapped. But don't you dare act like you're some victim here. Don't turn this around on me, he growled. I know what's going on. There was a pause, then Mom's voice dropped to a deadly calm. And what exactly do you think you know? I'm not stupid, Rachel, he said. I know you're screwing someone at work. I know it's about your precious promotion. And I know you've been lying to me for months. My breath caught. Lower your voice, Mom hissed. You don't know anything. I know enough, Nathan said. And if you think I'm just going to sit here and take it, you'll sit here and take whatever I give you, she cut him off. Because if you don't, you'll lose everything. There was silence after that. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I called Danielle and told her everything, Mom's affair, Nathan's behavior, the argument I'd overheard. Liv, this is bad, Danielle said, her voice laced with concern. I know, I said, pacing my room. But what am I supposed to do? Call them out? They'll just deny it. Maybe, Danielle said. But how much longer can you live like this? I didn't have an answer. Later that night, as I sat in my room, staring at the photos and messages I'd collected, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for the truth to come to me. I was going to bring it to light. Dinner that Friday was tense before it even began. Nathan grilled chicken on the back deck, while Mom sat at the table, scrolling through her phone with an air of distraction. I hovered near the sink, trying to keep my breathing steady. Tonight was the night. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I knew I couldn't keep their secrets anymore. Dinner's ready, Nathan called, his voice forced into cheerfulness. We sat in silence at first, the sound of utensils scraping plates the only noise. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of everything I knew. So, Liv, Mom said finally, looking up from her salad. How's school going? Fine, I replied, barely meeting her gaze. Nathan jumped in, his tone overly enthusiastic. Liv's going to be a famous writer one day. Isn't that right? Maybe, I said, my voice flat. Mom didn't seem to notice my tone, but Nathan's smile faltered. His eyes lingered on me, questioning, searching. I couldn't take it anymore. I know about Derek, I blurted, my voice louder than I intended. The table fell silent. Mom's fork froze midair, and Nathan looked at me like I'd just set off a bomb. What did you just say? Mom asked, her voice icy. I know about Derek, I repeated, my hands trembling under the table. I've seen the texts, the emails. I know you've been having an affair. Mom's expression didn't change at first. She just stared at me, her face unreadable. Then she set her fork down slowly, deliberately. Liv, you have no idea what you're talking about, she said, her voice controlled. Don't lie to me. I snapped, my voice breaking. I've seen everything, Mom. You've been using him for your promotion, haven't you? Nathan's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. Are you kidding me? He shouted, looking at Mom. You said nothing was going on. I don't have to explain myself to either of you, Mom said, her voice cold and sharp. Explain yourself? Nathan's voice rose. You've been lying to me for months, Rachel. Months. And you've been lying to me too, I said, turning to Nathan. The words were out before I could stop them. What the hell are you talking about? Nathan asked, his face a mixture of anger and confusion. You think I don't notice the way you act around me? I said, my voice shaking. The comments, the way you touch me when Mom's not around? Nathan's face turned pale. That's not Liv. You're misunderstanding. Am I? I shot back, tears welling up in my eyes. Because it doesn't feel like I'm misunderstanding anything. Mom looked between us, her expression slowly shifting from anger to something darker. What is she talking about, Nathan? Nothing, Nathan said quickly. She's twisting things, Rachel. You know how teenagers are. Don't you dare make this about me. I yelled, standing up. You're both liars. You're both disgusting. The room erupted into chaos. Mom and Nathan shouted over each other, their accusations flying like shrapnel. Nathan denied everything, insisting that I was imagining things, while Mom hurled insults at him, calling him pathetic and untrustworthy. At one point, Nathan turned on me, his voice full of venom. You don't know what you're talking about, Liv. You're just trying to cause problems because you're jealous of your mom's success. Jealous? I scoffed, my voice breaking. You've got to be kidding me. Mom cut him off, her voice like steel. If I find out you've done anything to her, Nathan, I swear to God. Oh, don't act like you're some saint, Nathan shot back. You're the one sleeping with your boss. Mom's hand slammed against the table. And you're the one who can't keep his hands to himself. The room went quiet. Nathan grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Mom sank into her chair, rubbing her temples like she had the worst headache of her life. I can't believe this, she muttered. You can't believe this? I said, my voice raw. I can't believe you. Either of you. Mom looked up at me, her eyes cold and tired. You don't understand, Liv. You think everything's black and white, but it's not. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices to get ahead. Sacrifices? I repeated, my voice rising. You're cheating on your husband, Mom. That's not a sacrifice. It's selfish. And what about you? She snapped. You think I don't notice the way you dress around him? The way you act like a victim every time he gives you attention? Her words hit me like a slap. I can't believe you just said that, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Mom stood up, her face hard. Believe what you want, Liv. But this family? It's falling apart because of you. She walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen, shattered. Nathan didn't come home that night. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I sat in my room, staring at the ceiling, my chest hollow and tight. Everything was out in the open now, Mom's affair, Nathan's predatory behavior, but instead of relief, I felt exposed and raw. The next morning, Mom's bedroom door was closed, her car still in the driveway. She didn't emerge as I got ready for work, so I left without seeing her. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see her at all. At the cafe where I worked part-time, I tried to focus on the usual routine, pouring lattes, wiping counters, pretending like everything wasn't falling apart. Danielle stopped by halfway through my shift, her expression anxious. I got your text, she said, leaning against the counter. What happened last night? I sighed, glancing around to make sure no customers were close enough to overhear. It was a disaster. I told them everything about Mom's affair about Nathan, and they just blew up. He left. She blamed me. Danielle's eyes widened. She blamed you? She said I was trying to ruin the family, I muttered, bitterness rising in my throat. Like this is all my fault. Danielle shook her head, her face a mixture of disbelief and anger. That's insane, Liv. You didn't do anything wrong. You're just stuck in the middle of their mess. Yeah, well, try telling her that, I said, grabbing a rag and furiously scrubbing the counter. What are you going to do now? Danielle asked softly. I don't know, I admitted, but I can't keep living like this. Something has to change. When I got home that evening, Nathan's truck was in the driveway. My stomach twisted as I walked up the steps, dreading what I'd find inside. The house was tense, the kind of silence that felt like it could crack under the weight of unspoken words. Nathan was sitting in the living room, his arms crossed, while Mom stood in the kitchen, a glass of wine in her hand. Neither of them looked at me as I walked in. Liv, Mom said finally, her voice clipped. We need to talk. I stayed near the door, my hand on the strap of my bag. About what? About the way you've been acting, she said, setting her glass down with a sharp clink. The way I've been acting? I repeated, my voice rising. You're seriously going to sit there and act like this is my fault? Nathan stood up, his expression a mix of frustration and exhaustion. Rachel, this isn't helping. Oh, so now you're the voice of reason? I snapped, glaring at him. You've been creeping on me for months, and you think you get to play mediator? That's not what happened, Nathan said, his voice steady but defensive. You're twisting things, Liv. Am I? I shot back. Because it sure didn't feel like it when you couldn't keep your hands to yourself. Mom's face tightened. Stop it, both of you. This isn't getting us anywhere. Now you want to be a peacemaker? I said, my voice shaking. You've been lying to everyone, cheating on him, and you think you get to tell me how to feel? Mom's eyes blazed. Don't you dare talk to me like that. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family. For this family? I laughed bitterly.
No, Mom.
You sacrificed this family for your career.
Don't pretend this is about us.
The argument spiraled from there, voices overlapping in a cacophony of accusations and defenses. Nathan insisted he'd done nothing wrong, that I'd misinterpreted his actions. Mom doubled down on her anger, lashing out at both of us in equal measure. At some point, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house, ignoring their shouts behind me. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, the road blurring through my tears. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I couldn't stay there. I ended up at Danielle's house. She opened the door in her pajamas, her face full of concern. I couldn't stay, I said, my voice cracking. She pulled me into a hug, letting me cry into her shoulder. It's okay, she said softly. You can stay here as long as you need. Over the next few days, I tried to avoid my parents as much as possible. Mom texted me once, a curt message asking when I was coming home. Nathan didn't reach out at all. I stayed at Danielle's, splitting my time between work and avoiding the reality of my shattered family. But deep down, I knew I couldn't avoid them forever. When Mom called me a week later, her voice was different, softer, almost pleading. Liv, we need to figure this out. Come home. Please. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the phone. Liv, she said again, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know if I believed her. When I finally went back home, the house felt different. The warmth and familiarity it once held were gone, replaced by an uneasy quiet that seemed to seep into the walls. Nathan's truck was nowhere in sight, and as I stepped inside, I realized I hadn't seen it for days. Mom was in the kitchen, sipping from her ever-present glass of wine. She looked up when she heard the door and gave me a tentative smile. Hi, Liv, she said, her voice careful, like she was afraid I might shatter. I set my bag down by the door and crossed my arms. Where's Nathan? Her smile faltered. She took another sip before answering. He's staying at a hotel for now.
We thought it would be best to have some space.
Did you think about me when you decided that? I asked, my voice sharp. Or did you just want to avoid more fights? Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time in weeks, she looked tired, really tired. I didn't handle things the way I should have, she admitted. I've made a lot of mistakes. But I'm trying, Liv.
I really am.
We sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where the confrontation had exploded just a week ago. The silence stretched between us until she finally spoke. I ended things with Derek, she said quietly. Completely. I told him I'm not taking the job in New York. I blinked, surprised. I thought you wanted that job more than anything. I did, she said, her voice heavy. But I can't keep lying to myself or to you. I've been selfish, Liv. I've been so focused on my career, on what I thought I needed to be happy, that I didn't see what it was doing to this family.
To you?
Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Do you even love him? I asked finally, my voice soft. She hesitated, swirling the wine in her glass.
I used to, she said.
But I think we've been pretending for a long time now. Nathan and I, we're not good for each other anymore. I nodded, unsure how to feel about her admission. What about him? I asked, my throat tightening. What's going to happen to Nathan? Her expression darkened. That depends. If what you told me about him is true, it is, I said firmly. She nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. Then I'll make sure he doesn't come back. You don't have to worry about that. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed her. The next few days were a blur of awkward silence and tentative attempts at conversation. Mom stayed home from work, something I'd never seen her do before, and she even started cooking dinner again. It wasn't much, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Nathan texted me once, a single message. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at the words for a long time before deleting the message. There was nothing more to say. Mom and I started having longer conversations, though they often veered into uncomfortable territory. One evening, as we sat on the couch with cups of tea, she asked, "Do you think we can fix this?" I don't know, I admitted. It's going to take a while. She nodded, her eyes glossy. I know I've let you down, Liv. I can't change what I've done, but I want to do better. I want us to be okay. I wanted that too, but I wasn't sure if it was possible. Trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. As summer approached, I threw myself into my writing. It became my escape, my therapy. I poured everything into my stories. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the complicated mess of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. One afternoon, I showed Mom a short story I'd written about a fractured family trying to heal. She read it quietly, her expression softening as she reached the final page. "This is beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have a real gift, Liv." Her praise felt different this time, sincere, unforced. It was the first time in months that I felt like we might be moving forward, however slowly. Nathan never came back to the house. Mom filed for divorce a few weeks later, and though it wasn't easy, I felt a sense of relief knowing he was out of our lives for good. As for Mom, she kept her promise. She started seeing a therapist and encouraged me to do the same. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. By the end of the summer, I felt like I was finally starting to breathe again. The wounds from the past few months hadn't fully healed, but they didn't feel as raw anymore. I knew it would take time for me, for Mom, for everything, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The truth had broken us apart, but maybe, just maybe, it was the first step toward putting the pieces back together.